Hello everyone. I want to talk about fear and letting go. This is something that I've been thinking about as I've been trying to record and speak freely and eloquently and fluidly into a camera, and I found myself sort of stuttering on words and failing to find the words to really communicate what I wish to communicate. And then in that moment, I engaged in a form of mindfulness, I suppose, a kind of inquiry into why am I unable to enter into this flow. It's ironic because I made a video literally a day or two ago about finding flow. And perhaps it is useful to explain that process with an example of, in the moment, finding flow when there is a seeming internal resistance within me. Now, this resistance is not just internal, there's also an external resistance. So there's some noise, some mechanical noise going on in the outside where I'm recording, which has been disrupting me before I recorded the video, and it's disrupting me right now. I don't know if my mic is picking up, but I knew that noise would sort of frazzle me because it sort of disturbed my nervous system and made me feel a bit tense and unable to be really grounded. And I suppose that explains a critical point of the creative process, right? When we're really creative, we're in this state of relaxation. We're not rigid, we're not tense, we're not trying to force out our creative ideas. We're in this state of allowing them to come to us. A mode of openness, a simple witnessing of consciousness, and that witnessing has this quality of acceptance, a kind of unconditional acceptance. A lot of our tension arises because we are putting conditions on reality. We want to force a particular outcome. Let's say we're sitting down to do a creative project, you want to write in a certain way, you want to write something that is creative and potent and of a high quality. And of course, when we have all that baggage of expectation that we bring to what we want to do, it can lead to writer's block or a kind of creative block. Because our nervous system is tense and we need to enter into that parasympathetic mode, that daydreaming mode where we're creatively playful. You can't play if you're stressed. And this is something that came to me literally today as I was, at the beach. I was walking along the shoreline, watching the waves, and I found myself in this mode of almost perfect equanimity. I was not worried about anything. I was not ruminating on all the things that my ego ought to be worrying about. I was in this mode of just simply witnessing consciousness and reality surrounding me, and watching the waves come and go. And, there was a state of almost ego dissolution, had qualities of a psychedelic experience, I suppose, because there was this pervasive silence of mind, silence of rumination. And I found myself, creating little songs and musical rhythms in my head, which I often do when I'm sort of in that sort of creative flow. And it was very peaceful. There was no stress there. There was no rigidity. There was just this quiet joy of existence itself. And I think when we are able to reside and discover that quiet joy within us, this silent tranquility, that is the most nourishing and supportive conscious state for any kind of creative endeavor that we have in life. We live in a world which imposes on us so many expectations of being successful, of wanting to have certain things, of being outcome dependent. And this can create such a huge psychological burden on us, which prevents us from being able to truly relax. And here's the thing, no matter where we are in life, no matter what stage of life there is, the ego will always be able to pull to mind things to be worried about or anxious about. The task that really confronts us is, are we able to relax and soothe our nervous system even when the mind is creating things to be worried about? And this raises, of course, the question of how do we learn how to relax? This is something that, we living in a burnout society where we are enslaved to working and productivity and turning ourselves into these robots, these objects of human capital. We have to acknowledge that there's a strong environmental pressure to push ourselves towards burnout. And this is something that I've dealt with and I've made videos talking about. And in the face of that burnout, this kind of neurochemical fatigue that we have when we've been working too long, stressing too much. We have this sort of adrenal fatigue when we have just so much sort of cortisol surging through our body from all the things that we've been thinking about and worrying about and yada yada. And as well from our phones, from the constant stimulation that we are inundated with from the constant surge of novel content that we can just swipe through. We're constantly stimulating ourselves, and from that hyper-stimulation, we're depriving ourselves of the utmost of importance of rest and stillness, inactivity, and simple silence. We have come to see silence as something aversive, as something boring, almost painful, because being hyperstimulated is our normal. And now I see that I've deviated a little bit from the opening topics of letting go and the element of fear. But I'm going to weave that in now because I want to talk a bit about silence and stillness, these two fundamental essences of mindfulness. And I was speaking about a few moments ago about this state of mindfulness that I had when I was at the beach watching the waves. And this is a state of consciousness that I and many people often slip into when we're out in nature, when we're away from the hustle and bustle of cities and noise and stimulation, and we're able to just watch and enjoy existence for what it is without, experiencing something mediated through a phone or a screen. And within that state where I was at the beach, like I said, there was this letting go of all the anxieties, the conventional stresses that we have a tendency to ruminate upon. My mind was silent and peaceful and able to just play with my creative ideas, my creative imaginations. I wasn't worrying about money or how am I going to support myself and all these sorts of stuff that many people think about, the necessity of survival in our world. Now, these problems, they didn't disappear, obviously, but I was able to reside in this state of mind where I could just be okay with what is. accepting of what is, and relax, even in a situation where other people might be stressing or something. I think what this goes to show is that if we are to eradicate fear, or at least develop a healthier relationship with fear, we have to understand what it means to let go. And let go of our mind's tendency to cling at things, to cling at certain outcomes. I think many of us, we're so fearful of things going wrong, of things not going the way we want it to, that fear really arrests us, it sticks to us, and we go about life in this very tense state. And I think an important thing I want you, the viewer, to reflect upon is, what is the state of my nervous system right now? Not just my mind, my thoughts, but really think into, how does your body feel? Are your muscles tense? Are your muscles contracted? Are you relaxed? Are you, do you have any aches and pains? Do these body scans, because they really tune you into the way your bodily organs are working. And I think many of us, we are so dissociated from our bodies. We're so dissociated from the accumulated tension within our muscles, because we are so in our heads. The energy of our consciousness, it has this strong attractor to being in here, being in this vigilant scanning mode. And it's stuck there. But if we, in a body scan or in meditation or a yoga nidra, we begin to bring our awareness to the entire field of sensations that are available to us, we come into contact with all the things that we've been repressing, all the different tensions in our muscles, for example. Because when we're stressed, we're not aware of it in the moment, but we tend to slightly tense our muscles. And if we're chronically stressed, our muscles are going to be chronically tightened. Think of your posture, for instance. Your posture is the accumulation of your habits, of how you hold yourself. And of course, we understand that the differences in posture between someone who is confident and healthy versus someone who is unhealthy and compromised and submissive or ill. And the differences in posture are, of course, the karmic accumulation. Karma is simply the results of actions, and actions accumulate over time. And so if you're stressed all of the time, that stress accumulates in our body, and our body represents that. Something, as a little detour, I was looking into, I think it's what it's called, physiognomy, in this podcast. Physiognomy is basically this sort of, it's an old psychological theory with regards to inferring certain psychological characteristics based on a person's face and their facial constitution. And I'm not going to go deep into it, but basically the theory suggests that, I don't know how to explain it, but someone who frowns a lot, for example, and their face is in a certain contraction for a long period of time, that will create certain contortions in their face over time. So you'll be able to maybe see certain like wrinkles or whatever right here or something like that. And I guess everyone knows intuitively when they look at someone, well, I suppose we're slightly conditioned out of this sort of way of judging a book by its cover, but like intuitively, sometimes we'll meet someone and there'll be just something off about them, whether it's just their face or their energy, but the facial expression is, I suppose, a footprint of someone's energy. And it's funny, like after listening to this long podcast about it, I started to really sort of scrutinize the faces of strangers and determining whether I trust that energy or I don't trust that energy. And I think there's whilst it isn't whilst the conventional scientific paradigm would regard it as pseudoscience, intuitively, I think there is a veil of truth there. But yeah, that's a slight detour, but I suppose that's just a representation of my thought currently. But yeah, it's I want to take this into a wider conversation with regards to our intuitions and our intuitive modes of knowledge. And I think over the history of my meditative practice, where I've repeatedly cultivated what you may call good karma, or the karma of heightened awareness and attentional and conscious attunement to the subtle dimensions of reality, the subtle dimensions within my inner world and the energies of creation. All that meditation has led to this refinement of my own intuition, so that when I'm speaking to a person, a new person, I'm not just speaking to a person. There's this deep energetical exchange, and often, I'm not even really conscious of what I'm saying. There's just a flow there, just a flow. In general, I don't like speaking to people besides my wife, but because speaking it takes energy away from me, and often most conversations that humans have are often frivolous and unnecessary. But when they are useful conversations, I'll have them. But that's a slight detour, I suppose. Long story short, I don't like small talk, but I guess many of you who listen and watch this sort of content, you probably agree with me. We have a sort of a deeper hunger for more meaningful conversations, but these more meaningful conversations, when they get into the nature of reality and metaphysics, spiritual topics, they tend to intimidate most people, because of course you need a certain caliber of mind, of cognition, to be able to comprehend these certain depths. And most people do not have that sort of capacity of cognition, or consciousness rather. Some people may feel that this is overly discriminatory to acknowledge this fact in reality, but it is a fact in reality that whilst we are all one, we are also many. And there's a great variety to the many emanations of Source, or God, as you wish to put it. And as a result, those of us who are interested in these deeper spiritual questions, these deeper philosophical probings, we are exceedingly rare within the human population. And I think that rarity can create a deep sense of loneliness. At least it has for me for most of my life. It's felt as though I were alone in my own questioning and probings, and it became more and more apparent as I got older and older. Because as you get older and older, if you already have a certain affinity to these questions, you will have a tendency to explore them. And in that exploration, you acquire certain knowledge and understanding and experiences which most of your peers at the same age will not have had, because their path is different, their dharma is different. They are interested in different things. And consequently, you become more and more and more different. And sometimes you have to, as a result of that difference, you have to let go of your old life and step into your new life. And that is a difficult thing to do, because it requires shedding the many attachments that we accumulate. And shedding those attachments in order to make space for who you are becoming. And we are always in this state of becoming, obviously, because change is our fundamental nature. From the minute we are born, we begin to die. I know that's a morbid way to put it, but it's the truth. The nature of reality is impermanent. Change is its nature, and we are a cluster of order amidst the entropic pull of the universe into disorder. I guess that's a more physics-based analogy to explain impermanence, but yeah. But it is quite remarkable how our organism sustains this form. But of course, eventually that life-preserving function of our organism, it slowly, over time, as we enter into old age, it sort of, self-destructs, maybe, I don't know, or it slowly stops being able to sustain you. Your genes start sort of experiencing damage and oxidative stress, and you get cancers and stuff like that, and problems and shit. That's life for you. And that's not a bad thing. It's not we look at old age and sickness as though it's a bad thing, but it's a necessary thing. It will confront us eventually. And I think we have to make peace with that. It's only the ego who is frightened of such things, Isn't it funny how it's all got darker outside as I've sort of stumbled into the more darker topics? But yeah, what I'm thinking about is, how do we make peace with all of these things? How do we make peace with death? Because I don't know who said it, where I read it, but it was this quote or phrase sort of speaking about how most of spirituality is a preparation for the process of dying and for the experience of dying. And I want to make a separate video where I go deep into the philosophy of death, the philosophy of dying, and what is the death process like, drawing from, say, certain sources like the Tibetan Book of the Dead and near-death experiences, and to sort of speak openly about what is this going to be like. Now, my experience of near-death experiences, I've not had one yet. Obviously, I've had psychedelic ego-death experiences, which are slightly different. I did have, severe panic attacks when I was in my drug addiction phase, which felt like I was dying it felt like something was very wrong inside my body, which when you have a kind of medical event, like your heart it feels like you're having a heart attack, and you've never had a sensation like that before. It feels very scary, and there were very psychedelic components to that. I remember going to A&E when I was having these sorts of things because I didn't know what it was, and it was a scary experience. But even in the fear of that experience, I remember this sort of I don't know, this silent peace behind it's all, behind all the panic and the fear and the anxiety. Strange, but been ranting for long enough. I think I'll leave that for a follow-up conversation because it's all dark now. I hope that's been interesting and insightful for all of you guys there. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Goodbye and adios, all that stuff. See ya.